It's an advice which serves us, but I really do believe in it, which is if you're not an infrastructure company, don't build infrastructure.
In this episode, I'm joined by Yann Leger, co founder and CEO of Koyeb, a cloud infrastructure company redefining how applications are deployed globally. Yann shares his incredible journey of building cloud service providers and cloud infrastructure software for over 14 years and the lessons he learned along the way. Hi, Yann. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Vishesh, for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, we met at the AI conference, and it was, I think, a lunch you hosted, you and the Koyeb team, and it was great to meet the team. And the lunch was actually pretty good, and I'm glad our paths crossed in San Francisco. But for everyone, do you want to give a little bit of background on what Koyeb is and what you guys are solving for your customers?
Sure. I'm Yann. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Koyeb, and basically we're a cloud infrastructure company, I would say. And what we do is we simplify application deployment from a general standpoint, and we let our users deploy high performance workloads globally, including inference and fine-tuning workloads.
And so, if I remember our conversation, you consider yourself more, even though you have a few data centers, plus you work with other cloud providers as well, you consider yourself more as a cloud infrastructure software company. Is that the right understanding? And how difficult was it to enter the market with some of the big incumbents?
Yeah, it's definitely the right understanding. We are focused on the software
Mhm.
side. We are trying to, I would say, merge the two worlds of hardware and software, but our main IP is the software. So we do provide a fully managed platform where you have one single, I would say, vendor. When you come to us, you don't have to go to another cloud service provider to connect your account. For instance, it's a fully unified experience where you come and in 2 minutes you can deploy.
Mm.
But our main IP is the software. We do global orchestration and serverless orchestration with a post-built stack,
Mhm.
and that's where we actually bring value to our users. On the hardware itself, we have some specific like deployments where it's unique. It's we are not like the in most cases we're not the one buying the hardware, so we can operate on any environment.
Mm. You have an extensive background in this space. You started with building teams and org for, I think, Scaleaway was one notable startup that you had set up a team for. How did you end up starting Koyeb?
Yeah, so I have an extensive background in cloud
Yeah.
infrastructure. I spent the last 14 years building cloud service providers,
Mhm.
basically. And I worked for one company back in 2000, I think
Mhm.
11 already, where we were building a cloud service provider with an AWS compatible API.
Mhm.
um, and at the time, if you look back in 2011, GCP was not even there. It didn't even exist. That's the first one I worked for. It's called Outscale. Then, like, I ran Scaleway for 6 years, and we did a complete go-to-market from no product to live product. Today, it's still running and operating.
Mhm.
The company Scaleway, and yeah, that's so I do have an extensive like background in the space. We ran the complete go-to-market. So originally back in 2013 was like we were providing IaaS, so
Mm.
infrastructure as a service, and we were our users and customers deploy 7 servers on demand per hour at the time.
Mm.
So it was knowing that like the landscape back in 2013 was like maybe GCP just um, came out. I think that they were just coming out. Azuri, I'm not sure how far they were, but probably not really
Mm.
far. And we came with the idea that like the traditional IaaS was virtualized and we wanted to provide dedicated performance. We gave you a full dedicated physical machine on demand and consume as a cloud service with an API by the hour.
Mhm.
And so this expanded into over the years of it expanded into a complete cloud portfolio. I think back in 2018, we started massively hiring. We hired 130 people in 3 months to build this complete cloud portfolio. And at the time, we were only 10 people
Wow.
and added like managed services, including managed Kubernetes, managed object storage, managed databases, compete with other players, basically, as only compute was not enough. And then to your original question on how we transitioned, at some point in 2019, we decided to leave, and we started actually like a couple of months after. It took like a bit of time, and we didn't even start with this product that we have now. So we had an intermediate product before, and at some point we transitioned to our serverless infrastructure with the idea that serverless infrastructure would be the next wave of infrastructure from what we saw, basically IaaS coming up, Kubernetes becoming a mainstream technology. And we believe that basically the next generation of infrastructure is going to be serverless.
Right. And the idea was to, when you left Scaleway, you already wanted to start a company. That's why you left the company, or what made you take the leap from being at a global company that's serving customers out of Europe and an established startup to taking that entrepreneurial leap?
We were actually already looking at building
Hmm.
a company before. With I have two co-founders, we're three, and I've been working with I think 14 years also
Oh,
nearly.
wow. It's a
So
long journey.
yeah, and Edward maybe 11 years or something like this. And yeah, we were already looking to build a separate entity. And so when we built Scaleway from scratch inside of a larger group, we had a complete entity, dedicated team, dedicated office as part of a larger entity. And at some point, the reason why we left when we scale is basically when we left, the company was over 200 people.
Hmm.
So challenges we had were also completely different, and we thought we could like do, I would say, better outside and get like this new a new journey to start. As yeah, we made some mistake when we scaled that, but and yeah, it just was a bit, I would say, different as a situation. And Scaleway is part of an ISP actually. Today it's owned by the Iliad Group, which is the second or third largest ISP in France. So it's not an autonomous entity. You don't have the same. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. And so you said at Scaleway, you had to rapidly grow the team from 10 to almost 130. With such a technical roadmap, adding so many folks that rapidly, do you want to talk a little bit about what kind of engineering challenges surfaced because of adding engineers at that pace?
We went through a lot of changes, like I would say in terms of culture, product, organization. Um, so you need to imagine an organization where we were 10 people on which were purely product engineering, part of managing with another entity, which is a hosting entity where you have 50 people with a culture which is not even DevOps. So you have software engineering on one side, infrastructure engineering on one side, and network engineering, which are teams which are not getting together because culturally they have a hard time working together, no DevOps culture there.
Mm.
And at the same time, you hire 130 people under the brand, the Scaleway brand,
Yep.
um, and you need to create a working organization. So you go from basically maybe 40 people which don't have a unified engineering culture to 140 people who need to work together with a culture and an efficient culture in terms of delivering, in terms of communication and cross-team communication. Um, so that's a bit like what we went through, and we hired over 3 months, knowing that in this case, with this like base teams, you don't have any middle management, you don't have any even like management in a way. It's just like extremely light,
Mm,
and you need to create like the product management culture, the engineering management culture, and getting a set of teams, because the way we structured it originally was to create teams per product,
mm,
which were interdependent products. And this, yeah, in terms of management, was a true challenge. That's the main like organizational challenge we went through, while keeping like having the product growing and constant inbound in terms of
mhm,
customers. I think that's the main one of the, if you are growing really fast and maybe too fast, that's the main like change. So now we're extremely careful about culture, making sure that we have the basis to grow, that uh, and getting also senior management when to be able to grow. One of the mistakes we did in the past was to hire like management which was not senior enough, not experienced enough.
mm,
Uh, so when you need to grow fast, it's a bit. And so one of the overall challenge we had at the time was like the we had good talents overall, but it just the experience wasn't, the average seniority was probably like too low compared to what we needed to scale extremely quickly, which created a bit of chaos.
mm. The issue was the product management working with engineering. What was a major issue in assimilating them in the mix?
I think you need to project a team where basically you have maybe people who can actually be in the same room and discuss together, to 6 to 10 teams which needs to have a roadmap
Mm,
uh, which is interdependent, so they rely on each
yep.
other. And this goes, if you don't have any process on how you actually like define, you build your roadmap, you build interdependencies, who is actually like owning the decisions also, like on the roadmaps, who is shaping the roadmaps. If when you are running business for a couple of like years, you have a vision of where you're going, and you have a knowledge of your industry, your customers, and how this is all working together. Then like you need to bring in people who don't necessarily have the same industry
Mm,
experience, both of them on the engineering side and the product management side. So that's one challenge. So you need to align visions, get them to get ownership, and building a vision for new product lines also takes time. So if you want to move fast, it's actually building a set of new startups in a way, in a once setup, in a, because it's also depending on the rest of the product. So it's autonomous because it might be a different product line and a different line of revenue,
mhm,
but it's also not autonomous, and because it goes into the global strategy, the autonomy you can give to people is also somehow limited. And um, we made a mistake, which was also like believing they could be completely autonomous at the beginning, in the sense that it was different product
mhm.
lines. But actually, they had so much coordination to do with other teams that, yeah, it.
Oh yeah, I've
Um,
seen that. When you create multiple divisions and not a single overarching owner of all the divisions, yeah, things start to get haywire because now the teams are tripping each other.
Yeah, and then one team might be blocked by another team because you ask them somehow to have, typically like to use each other's
Mhm.
products. But if you do this, and if the product that they are relying on is not mature enough, they are blocked, and they are going to ask for
Yep.
features which the team which they are dependent of is not going to deliver before several months or like weeks, and then they cannot move forward. So you start having also these problems of people, even if they understand, getting frustrated because they cannot move forward. Um, But anyway, it's all under knowing that you're hiring at the same
Yeah.
time. So you keep interviewing people, onboarding people. Onboarding people at a fast pace is also a lot of work, because even like giving access at some point, if you don't have the infrastructure or the teams to do it internally, you get people who are starting in your company, and you give them a laptop and they're like, what is after? Never run into issues at this level, but what you in really large corporation where some people wait like several weeks for a laptop, I mean, we didn't have this kind of issue. We had issues where potentially people didn't have enough CI resources, or you need to see this in 2017, where most of our infrastructure was the infrastructure we were controlling. So we were not relying on a lot of external tools either,
Hmm.
because we were an infrastructure
Yeah.
company. Anyway, a bunch of like fun like problems to look after. When you're in it, it's a bit different, but yeah. So this was like our experience scaling. Now the company is like 500 people.
Hmm.
Um, so still exists, and yeah, we started a new venture, which is fully VC backed, a different story, different context, but still working on solving like the next generation of infrastructure changes, I would say.
Hmm. But I'm sure there are a lot of learnings from that experience of scaling. And when you add so many people so fast, even I've experienced this, the domain knowledge that you need people to ramp up to get productive and really build things that make sense from a customer point of view is really important. If you don't get the onboarding on the domain knowledge right, then it can take way longer for someone to be truly understanding the roadmap, contributing. From that experience, now when you bring on someone at Koyeb, have you made any changes on how they get onboarded into the domain side of things?
Yeah, I think what is actually what needs to be realized and acknowledged when you scale fast is just anyway, when you hire someone, it takes a couple of months for them to be fully productive, usually on any stack. And even if it's an established team, it's going to take maybe for someone on the software engineering side, like 3 months, or like to be fully at speed. They are going to deliver, but it just takes the productivity level is going to improve after a couple of months. So when the challenge is also part of the challenge is also being realistic. If you're creating a new product line or a new product, you there is both like product discovery, which is one side. So you're building a product from scratch where you might have a vision, but you still need to validate a bunch of assumptions. And in parallel, you need to hire people who actually need to forge their own vision somehow, or they need to get this ownership, which is going to take even more time. I think of it is like one of the thing is, except if yeah, it's just like being realistic on the what you need to do to hire a lot of people and get them like highly efficient, and the preparation that needs to be done before. That's like where focus the most in is how to actually like, even in terms of hiring, classical things that you cannot really skip, like however they are called, like scorecards, or defining like who you are going to hire, be extremely precise on what is the mission and what is expected,
Hmm.
um, and how this is all going to work, because you can try to do it simultaneously, but if you don't, just like at some point the risk is skipping the essential pieces and having this chaos. Sometimes you just don't have the option if you want to scale fast, and you go into a chaos mode. But there is a lot of things you can prepare, and actually like even hiring too fast might just hurt your company, instead of like properly laying out the grounds to grow. Yeah.
So you've been running a lean company. How do you not burn cash? How do you run a frugal organization that is also solving a hard problem? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I like the way you phrased it. How do you not burn money? Is the question. We're a VC-backed company, but it's still the same problem of not burning too much cash. Still does
Yep.
exist, and it's still essential. And typically, one of the thing we is there is a thing about trying to be default alive. I think it's the key story, and one of the easy, I would say, mistake which we I don't think we ran into is burning a lot in terms of marketing and like trying to scale something where you feel you're going to burn too fast. What I mean is it's tempting sometimes to just throw a lot of dollars into events,
Parties.
and it's extremely expensive. If you look at marketing budgets of an established company, there is like typically ratios which are going to tell you, okay, you have one person doing marketing, they should spend 40K or four times their salary into operating programs. And this doesn't work at all in an early stage company, except if you have all figured it out. But if you are really early in your journey, you might be spending 40K and have zero return, and 40K per month is 500K a year. So it grows up quickly. And typically, I would say this one is a mistake. Then you have all the credits that you can use and building the wrong features. It's always like the most costly. What is the most valuable asset is probably the time of your team. Yeah, you better have a strong conviction when you ask someone to solve a specific problem in your team, and enough backing, and also hiring people who are expensive. If you don't have the cash like you, or if you don't have it figured out and they cannot help you scale, not sure it's the best thing to do in early phases. If you're running on a bootstrapped or early round, a pre-seed or seed round, it's a set of things where you can burn a lot of cash without results.
Yeah, those are good recommendations. The ratio of the size of the company or the stage of the company versus the spend on specific categories is a very good benchmark, because people raise money and they start spending on marketing and hiring and all these activities without having a clear watch on how fast it's going, and it's pretty easy to then fall into that trap of, oh shoot, I've spent a lot.
Yeah, and your investors, not all of them, but your investors might pressure you to spend more
Yeah.
actually. So I think like one key thing is to resist like the urge of spending more. There are reasons to spend. We've been like sometimes maybe a bit slow in experimenting in terms of marketing. So there are good reasons to spend, but it's just like, typically like marketing is really an area where you can spend a lot of money, um, but it's you need to have experiments which are sizable and where you measure like the return. But if you see that it's not working at all, you don't need to spend 10 or 20K on an experiment to see that it's not working. You can typically like some ways to burn money is ads. This is you can, and everyone is going to tell you, every agency is going to tell you, yeah, if you don't spend 20K, it's not going to work. So I think this is an easy trap, and we didn't run like into this, but we talked with other companies and founders who actually ran marketing and ads for 40K without any. So if it's 1 month, it's not going to kill your
Yep.
company. If you keep it running, that's clearly a danger. Yeah, I would say on the acquisition side, to be extremely careful about, because you might also believe it's working and it's actually not giving you the right lead or the right, yeah, for your product.
Yeah. And on that note, another slippery slope, and I think you highlighted that as well, is the roadmap. Like when you start building too much because you have raised cash and you start spending on solving n number, how do you keep your roadmap tight? And are there any lessons that you want to share there?
Roadmap is a tough topic and a challenge. In our case, we're a platform where the building blocks are costly in the sense that it takes sometimes like our iteration cycles are fast in a way and slow in another way, because like when we release a feature, because it's a distributed system, it the experiments getting into production when it's advanced core feature, it's like between 6 weeks and 3 months. It's not on the front end, we can ship like improvement every week, and we do, but on the back end and core features, it's way slower. So I would say we keep debating what is the next feature and what should we actually spend energy on. And there are features with which we have somehow designed and we never implemented, simply because at some point we had more data and we decided it's not like the right time to implement. And so we tend to defer the decision on what actually we implement to probably like the last minute, I would say to the last week.
Mhm.
So we have specifications. So we have a lot of specifications which are ready, but we take all the signals to make sure that we implement the right thing. So whereas like in larger organization, you might have a roadmap on the quarter or like something like this, we take the decision probably like in the 2 previous weeks where
Per sprint.
before to implement. So, and sometimes we do specification and we just say, actually, we have another signal or like another key element which is coming up. So we know that these features, because they are so core to our platform, will come, but just not now, because there is another customer which is blocked by this feature, and where we believe we need to get this customer moving forward in our funnel to learn more. The way we're not a sales driven organization per se, but we react to customer feedback and to where we learn the most, I would say.
Hmm.
What serve also our global strategy and vision, obviously, but for some decision, we look at who is actually like the um, customer who you might learn the most from.
Yeah, interesting. That makes sense. With Koyeb, you are competing with the likes of AWS, Google Cloud. Do you see them as a competition or do you see them as partners? And how do they see you?
AWS and GCP are always mentioned as competitors. We don't believe they are direct competitors in the sense that we are not like have a complete set of products, and we an alternative to them, and we also work with them.
Hmm.
So I would say that's the thing. Then I think I mentioned that we have the GCP believe we are a competitor. We don't believe we are a competitor. We believe we should be a partner to them, because yeah, there is no point in trying to compete directly with them, especially since we don't have the same set of products, and actually people might want to combine our technology with our platforms. But then yeah, we need to interoperate with
Hmm.
them, and we need to be able to run on them. So we have a region on AWS. Most I didn't mention this earlier, but most of our regions outside of any cloud service provider. So we have 6 regions outside of AWS, soon 7 outside of AWS,
Hmm.
and 1 on AWS. Yeah, it's for our customers who need to run on AWS because they have infrastructure there and they cannot move out of it. And we don't, yeah, we just like working to help companies on both sides with our software. And that's where I think like it goes back to our focus is on software and improving experience rather than directly infrastructure.
Hmm. About you've intentionally kept the team very lean. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you've managed to do that and still have the kind of presence you have?
We don't have so much like operational work, I would say. I would say that's one of the key things. It's how much time we spend on, yeah, operational work. Um, Right now, the global presence is related to the core of the technology. We build it this way. The initial vision was to build a global serverless platform. That's clearly like our target. So everything was designed to have multiple locations and run like this. But we still have time being wasted when we need to deploy more infrastructure. But yeah, I think it's just at this stage we were able to keep building with this small engineering team.
The operational overhead and comms becomes a lot easier when you have a small team. But given how technical your product is, and if I remember correctly, your team is partially remote, not everybody is co-located. How do you ensure that even with a small team, everybody is aligned? Have you felt that remote has been an issue, or it has not been an issue for you?
Yeah, remote is a challenge. So we started during COVID.
Hmm.
So we started as a remote company, thinking it would be
Hmm.
easy, like it was a new standard. Spoiler alert, is not like it's not easy. Um, but basically, we hired first. We gradually like increased our level of remote, I would say,
Hmm.
in the sense that we started originally from Paris, France. We then hired in France. When we started hiring in France, we asked everyone to come like once a month
Hmm.
to Paris. Then we started hiring across Europe. And we asked everyone to come every 6 weeks in Paris. We have an event which we call Everyone in Paris, which we do every 6 weeks on average. And we get all the team together to align everyone on the vision of on what is the status. And after expanding to Europe, we started hiring like full-time team members in the US. So really did it gradually. Um, and I think what worked, what helped in our case, really the thing about getting everyone together regularly.
Hmm.
So to make sure that everyone knows each other on also personal level, and actually you so much in just a couple of hours in terms of people understanding each other, working together and aligning on the target vision and mission. Then you still have a lot of change in terms of sharing the advantage of in person where you share quickly. Creativity brainstorming sessions are more fluid, so this still exists in terms of changes, I would say, but it's mitigation to get people regularly together for this specific moment. When we onboard people, I spend at least, when I have direct reports which are onboarded, I spend at like 1 hour every day with them, like for a couple of weeks, just to make sure that everything is clarified and to actually increase the volume of exchange, which is what actually in person brings you. You're just going to grab lunch together and you're going to chat. And this is how to reproduce remotely.
Yeah, I think in-person onboarding is a good idea. Definitely for the initial rapport, setting the rapport, and making sure that they get taste of the company culture. On the engineering hiring front, a lot of AI talent is concentrated, of course, in the US. Hardware talent is, in general, engineering talent is hard to find, but finding AI and hardware engineering talent is harder. What are some of the challenges adding engineering talent in Europe, competing with American companies? How are you dealing with that challenge?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we actually expanded to hiring remotely in Europe originally was to increase the talent pool. And this worked. We hired people. I don't know if we hired way faster, but our team is composed of experienced people and increasing. There is an asset also in hiring remotely in Europe is having a more international culture because one of the things overall, if you have a local market which is big enough, typically like France, you can have a lot of people which are centered towards the French market, which is not what we want because in terms of tech, it doesn't make much sense. So hiring remotely brings you an international culture by design.
Hmm.
In terms of talents pool, Europe has a lot of highly skilled technical um, people. And so on this side, I think we're pretty well served. And actually, like US companies started hiring in Europe like a couple of years ago already. If you look, like a lot of US companies are actually like now on tech talent, European tech talents. So we have highly skilled workers. Then, and in pure engineering skills, I think like they are competing with US talents without any issues. Just way as the cost of living is way lower. It's just like way less costly. Then what you don't have is we have a strong ecosystem in Paris, but it's not like the Bay Area ecosystem.
Hmm.
What you're losing, and it goes essential back to actually the remote question, like what you're losing, it's actually like potentially the connections. If your engineers are better connected, maybe they'll exchange more information between each other. But in terms of pure skills, I think it's just equivalent or even better. You might have more changes is actually in marketing functions where actually the mix of typically technical sales or technical marketing
Hmm.
um, is less present in Europe because you have less, and it's specific to our case where we're building a technical product so sold to a technical audience. But this kind of skills is more rare in Europe, like the mix. And yeah, potentially QK is better served, but Paris and Berlin are not probably not the best hubs to hire this kind of talents, knowing that one of the overall change of the European tech market is the number of large tech companies, which is low, and that's why we end up. So we hired in Europe team members who worked before for American companies, which is what not what you would expect. Say were working inside of Europe on the European, but they were actually all working for US company.
The talent war is going to continue with all the AI tooling that is coming. Do you see the talent pressure easing because of that, or that's still ways to go in terms of real impact on the pressure on finding talent?
I think it's going to get worse because then the danger of tools is always the same. You need to use them properly.
Hmm.
And so the skills that you are going to buy is someone using the tool properly. Like I've seen like junior people trying to use the AI tools and they don't know what they are doing, like in terms of software engineering.
Yeah.
So they copy paste outputs which are wrong. If you hire someone who is great at copy pasting the output of ChatGPT, you're not like any like skills. So no, it's I think it's even harder to hire. It's still hard to fake in an interview, but you might have the illusion somehow that like people know what they are doing and they are not,
Yeah.
because the real thing, especially in software engineering, is to understand, or even it works also. I'm saying software engineering, but it's not true. Like in technical marketing, it's the same. If you try to generate content and you just copy paste the content of the wording, it's not going to work. Just honestly, like you see that it's generated, and so you need to use it to generate content, but you also need to use your brain to adapt it to the targets. So I think it's actually going to be misleading. So you don't want someone who is not using AI tool at all because sure they are lagging
Yeah.
behind, but you need to. I think at some point we had in software engineering we had the issue with IDs, where IDs started to be more powerful, and people it seems like they don't really know what they are doing because the IDE is suggesting a lot of things. And so if you're hiring an engineer, you probably want them to understand what's happening behind the scene.
Yeah.
So I think it's there.
Yeah, debugging probably becomes much harder for those kind of engineers for sure. Yeah, and then the architecture can get really messy really quickly.
Yeah, the LLM is not going to give you the architecture of your project. Sure, it might suggest some things which are
Yeah.
relevant. We're dealing, for instance, on software engineering with distributed systems. I'm not sure your LLM is going to design your distributed system and account for race conditions or this kind of things.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit, at least to date,
Yeah.
it's not there yet. So yeah.
A lot of infra these days is deployed serverless, including the database and the backend. I read one of your posts that mentioned that you recently launched a feature where basically you could scale to zero, and that would allow you to have infinite dev environments. How are you tackling the full stack infinite dev experience, and what are the key changes on the serverless side that people should be aware of?
Yeah, that's makes sense. Like, so one key thing to understand is like our vision of serverless is that we're not like deploying functions. I just want to make this clear. We're letting like our users deploy direct stack web apps, so can be any GitHub repository on or a Docker container. And so what we do is we actually build like the source code into a Docker container and we run it on dedicated virtual machines. And which means the key thing here is that you can run any framework. You can run a Python framework, a JavaScript framework, a Ruby on Rails framework, whatever works for you, or you can run a model, an LLM, or a vision models, or a multi-model, which is a new main topic, with the same experience. And so we provide a unified experience for any of those workloads where when you deploy, you can deploy in 1 minute. You can automate it with our API and CLI, and we will scale it down to zero when there is no traffic. I would say with if you look at the virtual experience, I think they did a great job, like from the front end side. I mean, from the preview environments, and but it's anyway not costly, just in the
Yeah.
sense that it's static content most of the time. So we're doing the same thing for the backend. So you run all these full stack web apps without having to pay them if there is no traffic at all. Then for the data side, which you mentioned, it's another challenge. So we provide like serverless database where we partnered with Neon, and Neon is doing a great job like on providing an ability to branch the environment.
Hmm.
Our key focus is on the compute side and already providing you this full stack experience on the compute side where you can go from because even when you deploy like AI workloads, you probably have an LLM somewhere with your custom model
Hmm.
or your classical LLM, and then you have a streamlit like front end or any other front end somewhere which is talking to this API. And so what we let you build is really this compute environment where it scales down to zero. Then branching the database and so on, we work with Neon to provide this most of the time, and then you can combine both and have a full environment and get this like experience.
Right. Okay, so the storage is not completely scaled down to zero, I'm assuming,
I
because
mean,
of the limitations on Neon. So there's still
I
some.
mean, so they do provide scale to zero too.
Oh, they
It's a
do.
fully serverless.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why we're partnering with them because we have a shared vision on this. Basically, the database scales down to zero. You can, on us, deploy this database, which are scaling down to zero.
Oh, wow. I should definitely check them out. I'll drop the link on the podcast as well. Any key takeaways for someone who's building in competitive market? Cloud infra, you already have a few people that have been around. Is Terraform, SST, all these guys are in a similar space, or you think they're not your competition?
No, well, even as a C, it's not like exactly the same thing. It's alternative vision of the market, I would say. So, but we don't run into the same people, and especially because they are building like automation. So typically, even people building multi-tenant SaaS or large-scale SaaS use Terraform on to automate deployment on us. If you have a fleet of 2,000 services that you need to deploy, we will take care of all the orchestration and giving you the serverless primitives, but you will still have to create like these 2,000 services by yourself. And why I'm mentioning this is like what like the serverless primitives enables is you mentioned the infinite development environment, but another key use case is like fleet management. If you're building a multi-tenant SaaS application and instead of building creating like multi-tenancy inside of your app, you can actually have one dedicated environment per customer. And when there is no traffic, basically the environment is going
Down.
to scale down to zero. So you're not going to incur any costs. It makes it possible to do it at a cost where you can still do margin as an independent software vendor, and it gives you dedicated performance per customer. Yeah, so the I think like the question on the infrastructure you were asking is like, what is the advice? I would say overall, I've always kept giving the same like advice, like is if you, and it's an advice which serves us, but I really do believe in it. which is if you're not an infrastructure company, don't build infrastructure. And just so we deal with all the complexity, and there are alternatives, a bunch of alternatives. So I'm not saying come to us. I'm happy to help you, but if you're not an infrastructure company, don't build it because it's going to take you a lot of time. And just like that's a sense of, I would say, history at this stage. Infrastructure company or software companies automating infrastructure are here to help you build faster. This shouldn't be a concern. And another thing, actually, I've been like saying recently, which I do believe is happening in terms of pure AI, the inference cost is significantly decreasing. We're working on it. The auto-scaling capabilities is an efficiency technology. You can actually run larger models, and as the models get more precisions, if you believe today it's too expensive, I think in 6 months it's not going to be too expensive. If you made some math today, let's say today it's going to cost you 50K on AWS for to do inference with the technology you want. One, we can already do probably cheaper, and it's actually only going down. So for the same budget, you can have way more inference power, and it can change your business if you need more precision, actually.
A lot of infra companies like AWS and GCP have a lot of startup credits. Do you have something similar for early stage companies? Given you yourself are an early stage company, how does that work? How are you onboarding people?
Yeah, we do have a startup program for early stage companies. We're giving up to 30K of credits to deploy on our platform, which you can use over 1 year. So if you are an early stage company and you don't want to deal with the complex infrastructure, we're happy to help you.
And where can people sign up? It's koyeb.io or
Web.com.
koyeb.com,
I
sorry.
mean, you can do web.io, it's going to redirect you, but the official one is koyeb.com. You can sign up. We have a free tier with CPU machines, so you can get started for free. We're going to release, spoiler alert, a free trial also for the plans. So it's fully self-serve, and if you need any help for large workloads, we're also here to help get you on board.
Awesome. Jan, thanks for taking the time and joining me on the podcast. It was fun chatting.
Thank you so much.
If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next episode.